They call him the Butcher of Chicago, a man who never flinches, never forgives, and never forgets. But the night Lorenzo Moretti came home 3 hours early, the gun in his holster was useless. It wasn't an assassin waiting in the dark. It was the one person he never looked at twice. When the maid pressed her hand to the Mafia Don's chest and whispered, "Stay silent," he didn't realize his life was effectively over. What he heard next from the other room didn't just break his heart. It froze his blood. You think you know betrayal? You have no idea. The rain in Chicago didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Lorenzo Enzo Moretti watched the windshield wipers of his armored Rolls-Royce Phantom slice through the deluge. It was 2 a.m. He wasn't supposed to be on Lakeshore Drive. He was supposed to be in a private hangar in Teterboro, negotiating a truce with the 5 families of New York. But the gut instinct that had kept him alive for 34 years, the same instinct that earned him the title of Capo Dei Capi, had screamed at him to leave. The meeting had felt wrong. The air was too still, the handshakes too clammy. So he had ghosted. He took a private charter back to Illinois without telling a soul, not even his head of security, Bruno. "Don't pull into the main gate," Enzo instructed his driver, a mute giant named Cale. "Drop me at the service entrance on the north side. Kill the lights." Cale nodded, his eyes scanning the mirrors. The car glided silently down the wet asphalt of the lengthy driveway leading to the Moretti estate. The mansion was a fortress of limestone and Gothic architecture, looming against the stormy sky like a beast sleeping with one eye open. Enzo was exhausted. His left shoulder throbbed where a bullet had grazed him 6 months ago, a constant reminder of the price of the crown. He just wanted a scotch, a hot shower, and to crawl into bed beside his wife, Camilla. Camilla, the daughter of the senator, the woman who had brought legitimacy to his blood-soaked name. He stepped out of the car, the rain instantly soaking his cashmere coat. He signaled Cale to loop around and wait. Enzo punched the code into the keypad of the servant's entrance. 1985, his birth year. Simple, arrogant. The door clicked open. The kitchen was dark, illuminated only by the faint blue glow of the Sub-Zero refrigerator and the lightning flashing outside the oversized windows. The house was usually silent, but this silence felt heavy, pressurized. Enzo's hand drifted to the Beretta tucked in his waistband. He moved across the marble floor, his Italian leather soles making no sound. He was a predator in his own territory. He reached for the handle of the door that led to the main hallway, but before his fingers could graze the brass, a shadow detached itself from the pantry. Enzo drew his weapon in a blur of motion, leveling the silencer at the figure's forehead. "Move and you die," he growled, the thunder masking his voice. The figure didn't flinch. It didn't beg. It stepped into the sliver of moonlight casting through the window. It was Sophie. Sophie Clark, the maid. The quiet girl with the hazel eyes who folded his shirts and polished the silverware. She had been with the household for 2 years, and in all that time, Enzo wasn't sure he had ever heard her speak more than 10 words. "Yes, sir. No, sir. Right away, sir." But tonight, she wasn't looking at the floor. She was looking straight into the barrel of his gun, her chest heaving, her hair plastered to her forehead as if she had been running. She wasn't wearing her uniform. She was in an oversized grey t-shirt and shorts, barefoot on the cold stone. "Mr. Moretti," she breathed, her voice shaking, but her eyes fierce. "Why are you awake, Sophie?" Enzo lowered the gun an inch, but his finger stayed on the trigger. "And why are you lurking in the dark?" She didn't answer. Instead, she closed the distance between them. It was a breach of protocol so severe it was almost suicidal. She reached out, her small, calloused hand gripping his soaking, wet coat. "You need to leave," she whispered. "Now!" Enzo frowned, his patience snapping. "This is my house. Step back, Sophie, or—" "Please," she hissed, her grip tightening. "You weren't supposed to be here. The manifest said you were in New York until Tuesday. Plans change." Enzo shoved her hand away. Who is here? Intruders? Worse, Enzo scoffed. There is nothing worse than intruders in a don's house. He turned toward the hallway door again. Sophie threw herself in front of him, her back hitting the door with a dull thud. Tears were welling in her eyes now, hot and desperate. Enzo, stop. If you go out there, you're a dead man. He froze. She had used his first name. No servant ever used his first name. He grabbed her by the jaw, forcing her to look at him. Up close, he smelled her. Vanilla and terror. What are you talking about? She raised a trembling finger to her lips. Stay silent, she mouthed, the command hanging in the air like a guillotine blade. Just listen. She reached behind her and cracked the door open barely an inch. The sound from the main living room drifted into the kitchen. The acoustics of the mansion were designed to carry sound for parties, but tonight they carried a conversation that hit Enzo harder than a hollow-point bullet. Champagne is chilled, darling. We should toast. It was Camilla, his wife. Her voice wasn't sleepy. It was bright, excited. To the widow Moretti, a deep, gravelly voice replied. Enzo felt the blood drain from his face. He knew that voice. It was Santino the Bull Russo, his underboss, his best friend since they were stealing hubcaps in Little Italy. To us, Camilla laughed. The sound of crystal clinking echoed. When does the news break? The plane went down over the Atlantic 20 minutes ago, Santino said, the sound of a cigar being cut punctuating his sentence. Mechanical failure. Tragic. The bodies will likely never be recovered. Enzo stood frozen in the dark kitchen, the cold rain on his skin suddenly feeling like ice. They hadn't just planned a coup. They had rigged his private jet. If he hadn't taken the charter, he would be debris floating in the ocean right now. He looked down at Sophie. She wasn't crying anymore. She was watching him, her eyes dark pools of understanding. She had saved his life. But why? The realization hit Enzo with the force of a physical blow, staggering him back a step. He looked at the Beretta in his hand. It felt heavy, clumsy. He had enough rounds to kill them both. He should kill them both. Burst through the doors, put 2 in Santino's chest and 1 in Camilla's treacherous heart. He took a step forward, rage blinding him. Sophie's hand clamped over his wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. No, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator. Enzo looked at her with wild eyes. Get off me! I'm going to slaughter them! And then what? Sophie challenged, her whisper sharp as a razor. Santino has 4 men stationed at the front gate, 2 in the garden. He didn't come alone. You kill them, his security team comes in and turns you into Swiss cheese before you can reload. You're declared dead, Enzo. The family trusts Santino. If you appear now, without backup, he'll spin it. He'll say you went mad. He'll kill you and claim self-defense. Enzo grit his teeth, the muscles in his jaw jumping. She was right. Strategically, she was absolutely right. He was outnumbered, exhausted, and officially dead. The element of surprise was his only weapon, but it was a single-shot weapon. How do you know about the security? Enzo asked, his eyes narrowing. I served them coffee, Sophie said simply, before I came down here to hide. They think I left for the night. Why didn't you leave? Sophie looked down, a flush rising on her cheeks that the darkness mostly hid. I forgot my book. I came back. I heard them talking. I heard the plan. And you waited for me? I waited to warn you, or to mourn you. Something shifted in Enzo's chest, a strange warmth in the middle of the freezing cold reality of his life collapsing. He pulled her away from the door and dragged her toward the servants' pantry, a narrow walk-through lined with shelves of imported pasta and oils. Is there a way out where they won't see us? Enzo asked, holstering his gun. He needed to think. He needed a war room, not a kitchen. The laundry chute, Sophie said. It drops to the basement. There's a storm tunnel that leads to the boathouse. Enzo looked at her, impressed. I didn't even know the storm tunnel was accessible." "You own the house, Mr. Moretti," she said, a dry wit surfacing despite the danger. "You don't clean it." "Enzo," he corrected her. "If we survive this, you call me Enzo." "If," she emphasized. They moved toward the laundry room adjacent to the kitchen. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot to Enzo's ears. He could still hear the murmur of voices from the living room, Camilla's laugh, a sound he used to love, now sounding like the cackle of a witch. "What about the accounts?" Camilla was asking. Enzo paused, signaling Sophie to stop. He needed to hear this. "Already transferred," Santino replied. "The Cayman hold is unlocked with his biometric data. Or rather, the copy of it you so kindly acquired while he slept." Enzo instinctively touched his thumb. Camilla, the nights she had held his hand while he slept, the times she had cleaned his phone. She had been harvesting his digital life piece by piece. "And the maid?" Santino asked. Enzo's blood ran cold. He looked at Sophie. She went rigid. "Sophie?" Camilla sighed, sounding bored. "She's a nobody, a stray. She has no family, no history. I fired her an hour ago. Told her to take the night off and not come back until Monday. She's probably halfway to the bus station." "Good," Santino grunted. "Loose ends are messy. If she comes back, deal with her." "With pleasure. She's too pretty for her own good anyway. I've seen the way Enzo looks at her when he thinks no one is watching." Enzo blinked. He looked at Sophie. She was staring at the floor, shame radiating off her. Had he looked at her? He thought he had been discreet. He thought he was just appreciating efficiency. But perhaps, in the lonely vacuum of his marriage, his eyes had lingered on the only softness in his life. "We have to go," Sophie whispered, tugging his sleeve. "Now." Enzo nodded. They slipped into the laundry room. He opened the chute, a metal square in the wall. It was a tight fit. "Ladies first," he muttered. Sophie didn't hesitate. She grabbed the edges and slid feet first into the darkness. A soft thud echoed seconds later. Enzo followed, the metal scraping against his tailored suit, plunging him into the abyss of his own basement. He landed on a pile of linens. The basement smelled of detergent and damp earth. Sophie was already at the heavy iron door of the storm tunnel, wrestling with the rusted wheel mechanism. "It's stuck," she grunted, straining. Enzo moved her aside. "Let me." He gripped the wheel. His shoulder screamed in protest, the old wound flaring up, but he channeled his rage into his grip. With a metallic screech that sounded dangerously loud, the wheel turned. The door groaned open, revealing a black tunnel that smelled of lake water and rot. "Go," Enzo commanded. As Sophie stepped into the tunnel, the lights in the basement suddenly flickered on. "Hey!" a voice shouted from the top of the stairs. Enzo spun around, drawing his gun. At the top of the basement stairs stood Marco, one of Santino's enforcers. A massive man holding a submachine gun. Marco's eyes went wide. He was staring at a ghost. "Boss?" Enzo didn't hesitate. He didn't offer an explanation. He double-tapped the trigger. Foot! The silencer did its job. Marco crumpled, tumbling down the wooden stairs, landing in a heap at Enzo's feet. "Move!" Enzo roared, shoving Sophie into the tunnel and slamming the iron door shut behind them. He spun the wheel, locking it just as bullets began to ping against the metal from the other side. They were in the dark, trapped in a tunnel underneath the estate. And the hunt had just begun. "Where does this come out?" Enzo asked, his voice echoing in the damp space. He pulled out his phone. No signal. "The boathouse," Sophie said, her voice trembling again. "But Enzo, there's something you need to know about the boathouse." "What?" he snapped, using the light of his phone to illuminate the path. "That's where I live," she said. "The servants' quarters in the main house had mold. You didn't know. So I moved into the loft above the boathouse 3 months ago." So, she swallowed hard. "That's where I keep it." "Keep what?" She looked him dead in the eye, the blue light of the phone casting long shadows on her face. "The leverage. The files. Enzo stopped walking. What files, Sophie? I'm not just a maid, Enzo, she confessed, the echo of the gunshot still ringing in their ears. My real name is Sofia Valenti, and my father was the man you killed to take the throne. Enzo froze. The Valenti family. The war of 2018. He had wiped them out. I came here to kill you, she said, tears streaming down her face. I spent 2 years waiting for the perfect moment to poison your scotch or slit your throat while you slept. Enzo raised the gun slowly, aiming it at her chest. Give me one reason why I shouldn't finish your father's legacy right now. Because, Sophie stepped towards the gun, her chest touching the silencer. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped hating you, and I started seeing them, Camilla and Santino. They are the ones who sold my father out to you. I have the proof in the boathouse. I have the recordings. I have everything. Enzo stared at her. The twists were coming too fast. His wife was a traitor. His best friend was a usurper. And the maid who just saved his life was the daughter of his greatest enemy. Show me. Enzo lowered the gun. But if you cross me, Sophia, I will burn this city to the ground with you in it. I know, she whispered. I'm counting on it. The tunnel was a claustrophobic nightmare of dripping water and scurrying rats. Enzo moved with the efficiency of a soldier, but his mind was a storm. Sofia Valenti, the daughter of Carlo Valenti, the man Enzo had shot in a warehouse in 2018 to end the 3-year war. He remembered Carlo's last words, "My blood will drown you." He hadn't realized Carlo meant it quite so literally. They reached the end of the tunnel, a heavy wooden trapdoor that pushed up into the floor of the boathouse. Enzo shoved it open, emerging into the cool, musty air of the boat storage. A sleek mahogany Riva Aquarama bobbed in the water slip, but Sophie bypassed it, scrambling up a ladder to the loft. Enzo followed, gun drawn, sweeping the room. It was a small space, humble but warm. Books were stacked everywhere. A small cot, and hidden beneath a loose floorboard under the bed, a metal lockbox. Sophie pulled it out, her hands shaking as she keyed in a combination. She pulled out a stack of yellowing papers and a USB drive. Here, she said, shoving them at Enzo. Look at the dates. Enzo scanned the papers in the dim light coming off the lake. Bank transfers, call logs. 2018, Enzo muttered. Before the war ended. Santino was feeding my father your locations, Sophie said, her voice hollow. He wanted you dead back then so he could take over. But you were too good. You survived every ambush. So Santino switched sides, sold my father out to you to gain your trust, and played the long game. And Camilla? Camilla was the broker. She was sleeping with Santino before she ever met you. She married you to keep you distracted while they siphoned your accounts. Enzo felt a bile rise in his throat. His entire marriage, his best friendship. It was all a theatre production. He looked at Sophie. Why didn't you use this to destroy me? I told you, she said, meeting his gaze. I wanted to kill you myself. But then I watched you. I saw you pacing in the library at night, carrying the weight of the families. I saw you treat the staff with respect, unlike Santino, who treats us like furniture. I realized you were just a soldier in a war you didn't start. You killed my father, yes. But Santino killed him first by betraying him. A sudden crash of glass downstairs shattered the moment. They're here, Enzo hissed. He grabbed the box and the drive. The boat? Too loud, Sophie said. If we start the engine, they'll hear it from the main house. They'll have snipers on the cliff. Then we swim? In this storm? We'll drown. Sophie's eyes darted around the room. The jet skis, under the tarp. Enzo looked over the railing. 2 black jet skis sat on the dock. They were faster, lower profile, but exposed. Can you ride? Enzo asked. I grew up in Sicily, Enzo. I could ride before I could walk. Good. Take the lead. We head south, towards the Navy Pier lights, then cut hard into the industrial canal. Do not stop. Do not look back. They scrambled down the ladder, Enzo helped her push the first ski into the water. As he pushed the second one in, the boathouse door burst open. 3 men in tactical gear poured in. Enzo didn't hesitate. He fired 3 shots. Bam, bam, bam! 2 men went down. The third dove behind a stack of crates. "Go!" Enzo roared, jumping onto his ski. Sophie hit the ignition. The engine roared to life. She gunned it, shooting out of the slip and into the churning black water of Lake Michigan. Enzo followed a split second later, just as bullets began to chew up the wood of the dock behind him. The rain stung like needles. The waves were 3 feet high, slamming into the hull of the jet ski. Enzo kept his head down, following the white spray of Sophie's wake. He could see flashlights sweeping the water from the cliffs above his estate. A spotlight from the private pier clicked on, sweeping the darkness. Pop, pop, pop. Bullets hit the water around them. They were shooting blindly into the dark. Sophie banked hard left, guiding them toward the shadow of a massive breakwall. She knew the lake better than he did. She navigated the treacherous currents with a fearlessness that made Enzo's heart hammer against his ribs, not from fear, but from adrenaline. They rowed for 20 minutes, the cold seeping into their bones, until the lights of the Moretti estate were just a faint glow on the horizon. They slowed down as they entered the murky waters of the industrial canal, an area lined with rusted factories and abandoned warehouses. They killed the engines and drifted under a rotting wooden pier. Enzo sat there for a moment, chest heaving, water dripping from his nose. He looked at Sophie. She was shivering violently, her grey t-shirt soaked and clinging to her skin, her teeth chattering. He maneuvered his ski next to hers and reached out, grabbing her hand. It was ice cold. "We're alive," he said, his voice rough. Sophie looked at him, mascara running down her cheeks, hair wild. She looked like a drowned rat. And yet Enzo thought she looked more regal than Camilla ever had in diamonds. "Now what?" she asked through chattering teeth. "You're dead to the world. You have no money, no soldiers, and the clothes on your back." Enzo squeezed her hand. A dark, terrifying smile spread across his face, the smile that had made him the Don. "Now," he said, "now we go to hell, and we recruit the devil." The safe house wasn't a house. It was a basement beneath a failing boxing gym in the South Side, owned by an old Irish trainer named Sully, who owed Enzo his life 3 times over. Sully didn't ask questions. He just unlocked the heavy steel door, tossed Enzo a first aid kit and a bottle of Jameson, and went back upstairs to punch a bag. The room was sparse, a leather couch, a table, a lamp. Enzo stripped off his ruined suit jacket and shirt. The bullet graze on his shoulder from months ago was aching, and he had a new gash on his arm from the laundry chute. "Sit," Sophie commanded. She had found a towel and dried her hair, wrapping herself in one of Sully's oversized gym hoodies. Enzo sat on the edge of the couch. "I can do it." "Shut up," she said, opening the first aid kit. She poured whiskey over his arm. Enzo hissed, but didn't pull away. She worked with steady hands, stitching the cut. The silence between them was thick, charged with the shared trauma of the night and the bizarre intimacy of the situation. "You have good hands," Enzo murmured, watching her concentrate. "I wanted to be a surgeon," Sophie said, tying off the suture. "Before the war. Before my father died and we lost everything. I ended up scrubbing floors instead." Enzo looked at her. Really looked at her. "I'm sorry about your father. It was business, but it cost you a life." "It cost me a future," she corrected. She looked up, her hazel eyes locking onto his. "Don't make me regret saving you, Enzo. I won't." He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek. Her skin was warm now. He shouldn't touch her. She was a liability. She was the daughter of an enemy. But in this basement, with the world hunting them, she was the only real thing he had left. Sophie leaned into his touch for a second, then pulled back, standing up abruptly. "The drive. We need to see what's on it." Enzo nodded, shaking off the moment. He plugged the USB drive into a dusty laptop Sully kept on the desk. They spent the next 3 hours in silence, scrolling through files. It was worse than Enzo had imagined. It wasn't just theft. It was a systematic dismantling of the Moretti Empire. Santino had been selling routes to the Russians. He had compromised the judges Enzo had in his pocket. And Camilla? Enzo clicked on a video file. It was grainy footage from the security camera in his own bedroom. It showed Camilla and Santino in his bed. "He's so boring," Camilla was saying on the video, tracing Santino's chest. "He talks about honor like it pays the bills. I can't wait until he's gone. I'm going to redecorate the whole house. White marble everywhere. Get rid of that depressing dark wood." "Soon, babe," Santino laughed. "Tuesday. The plane." Enzo slammed the laptop shut. The plastic casing cracked under his grip. He stood up, pacing the small room like a caged tiger. The humiliation burned hotter than the betrayal. They were laughing at him, in his own bed. "They think I'm dead," Enzo whispered. "They think they've won." "That's your advantage," Sophie said from the couch. "They're going to get sloppy. They're going to celebrate." "When is the funeral?" Enzo asked. "Usually 3 days after a death," Sophie calculated. "So Sunday." "Sunday," Enzo nodded. "A closed casket, obviously, since my body is lost at sea." He turned to Sophie. "Do you know where the Greeks hang out?" Sophie frowned. "The Costas family?" "They hate you. You took the port territory from them." "Exactly," Enzo grinned. And it wasn't a nice grin. "They hate me, but they hate Santino more. Santino promised them the ports back, didn't he? In those emails?" "Yes," Sophie nodded, understanding dawning on her. "He promised to return the territory once he took over." "But Santino is a liar," Enzo said. "He already sold the ports to the Russians. We saw the contract. So if you show the Greeks that Santino double-crossed them, then I don't need an army," Enzo finished. "I just need to light a match." The meeting took place in the back of a Greek diner at 4 a.m. Enzo walked in alone. He was wearing borrowed clothes, jeans and a black leather jacket from Sully. He looked less like a don and more like a street brawler. Nikos Kostas, the head of the Greek mob, sat in a booth eating souvlaki. He was a massive man with a beard like steel wool. 4 armed guards stood around him. When Enzo walked in, the guards drew their weapons instantly. "Easy," Enzo said, raising his hands. "I'm just here for breakfast." Nikos stared at him, his fork freezing halfway to his mouth. "Moretti, you're dead. I saw the news. Plane crash." "I got better," Enzo deadpanned. He slid into the booth opposite Nikos. "Give me one reason not to put a bullet in your head right now," Nikos growled, signaling his men to hold fire but keep aim. "Because I'm the only one who can stop you from losing $10 million, Enzo said. He tossed the USB drive onto the table. "Santino Russo. He promised you the ports back if you supported his coup, right?" Nikos narrowed his eyes. "Maybe." "He sold them to the Volkov brothers yesterday." Enzo lied smoothly. Well, half lied. The deal was pending, but Nikos didn't need to know that. "Check the files. Folder marked Port Authority." Nikos signaled one of his men to bring a tablet. He plugged the drive in. As he scrolled, his face turned a shade of purple that matched the onions on his plate. "That Malaka!" Nikos spat, slamming his fist on the table. "He swore on his mother." "Santino has no mother," Enzo said. "He was spawned in a sewer." Enzo leaned forward. "Here is the deal, Nikos. I'm dead. I'm staying dead until Sunday. On Sunday, at my funeral, all the heads of the 5 families will be there. Santino will be there, accepting the crown. And I want you to lend me 10 of your best men, not to kill him, just to secure the perimeter. I want to walk in there alone, but I need to know that when I do, his guards outside won't rush in to save him." "And what do I get?" Nikos asked, wiping his mouth. "You get the ports," Enzo said. "For real this time. And you get the pleasure of watching Santino Russo beg." Nikos looked at Enzo for a long moment. Then he laughed, a booming sound that shook the diner. "You got balls, Moretti. I always said that. Crazy, but balls." "Anan." Nikos extended a greasy hand. "We have a deal." Enzo shook it. He walked out of the diner into the pre-dawn light. Sophie was waiting in Sully's beat-up Ford Taurus around the corner. "Well?" she asked as he got in. "We're in business," Enzo said. He looked at her. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, but she was still there, still with him. "You should go, Sophie," he said quietly. "Take the car. Drive to Canada. I have an account there I can give you access to. Start over." "No," she said, putting the car in gear. "Why? This gets dangerous now. Bullets are going to fly." "I'm not leaving you, Enzo." "Why?" She looked at him, and the rawness in her eyes took his breath away. "Because you're the first person in my life who didn't lie to me. And because I want to see the look on Camilla's face when you walk through that door." Enzo chuckled. A genuine sound. "You're vindictive, Sofia Valenti." "I learned from the best," she smirked. "Drive," Enzo said, leaning back and closing his eyes. "We have a funeral to attend." Sunday morning arrived cloaked in a grey mist, fitting for the funeral of a king. The service was held in the private chapel on the Moretti estate grounds, a towering Gothic structure of stone and stained glass. Every major crime figure from Chicago to New York was in attendance. The parking lot was a sea of black SUVs and grim-faced bodyguards. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of white lilies and expensive perfume. An open casket sat at the altar, empty, of course, symbolizing the body lost at sea. A large portrait of Enzo, looking stern and invincible, stood on an easel next to it. Camilla stood at the pulpit, a vision of tragic beauty, in a custom Dior black lace dress and a veil that obscured her dry eyes. She gripped a tissue, dabbing at invisible tears. "Enzo was more than a husband," she said, her voice trembling with practiced perfection. "He was my anchor, my protector. To lose him so suddenly. It feels like the sun has been ripped from the sky." In the front row, Santino Russo sat with his head bowed, looking the part of the grieving brother. He wore a black armband over his suit. Occasionally he would reach out and squeeze Camilla's hand as she faltered. The five families watched, nodding in sympathy. They had already accepted the transition of power. Santino was the heir apparent. "He would have wanted us to be strong," Camilla continued, looking out at the crowd. "He would have wanted the family to remain united under strong leadership." She looked meaningfully at Santino. Santino stood up, buttoning his jacket. He walked up to the pulpit, placing a comforting hand on Camilla's shoulder. "Thank you, Camilla," Santino said, his voice gravelly and projecting authority. "I promise you, and I promise all of you, I will honor Enzo's memory. I will lead this family with the same strength he did." "Will you?" The voice boomed from the back of the chapel, cutting through the silence like a thunderclap. Every head turned. Camilla froze. Santino's eyes went wide. The heavy oak doors of the chapel swung open. Enzo Moretti stood in the doorway. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing dark jeans, a black tactical turtleneck, and a long trench coat. He looked rugged, dangerous, and very much alive. Beside him stood Sophie. She wore a sharp black pantsuit they had bought with cash that morning. Her hair was pulled back, her chin high. She didn't look like a maid. She looked like a queen. "Enzo," Camilla whispered, her face draining of all color. She gripped the pulpit so hard her knuckles turned white. It's a miracle!" "Save the performance, darling," Enzo said, his voice calm, but carrying a lethal edge as he walked down the center aisle. His footsteps echoed on the stone floor. Click, click, click. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea. Murmurs erupted. "He's alive." "It's a ghost." Santino recovered first. His hand went to his waistband. "This is an imposter. Security." "Your security is gone, Santino," Enzo said, not breaking stride. "Nikos Kostas sends his regards." His men are currently relieving your team of their weapons outside." Santino looked toward the side exits. Greek enforcers stepped out from the shadows of the vestibules, arms crossed, nodding at Enzo. Santino was trapped. Enzo reached the altar. He stopped 5 feet from his wife and his best friend. Up close, he could see the terror in their eyes. It was intoxicating. "You look disappointed, Santino." Enzo smiled coldly. "Did the champagne not agree with you?" "Enzo, brother," Santino stammered, raising his hands. "We thought you were dead." "The reports. The plane. The plane you sabotaged?" Enzo asked. "No, never. Who told you that? Lies." Santino pointed a shaking finger at Sophie. "Her? The maid? She's crazy, Enzo. She's been stealing from you. We fired her." Enzo turned to the congregation. "My underboss claims I am lying. He claims my wife is a grieving widow." Enzo pulled a small remote from his pocket and pointed it at the projection screen that had been set up to show a montage of his life. Instead of photos of Enzo, the screen flickered to life with the security footage from the bedroom. The image was crisp. Santino and Camilla, tangled in the sheets. The audio boomed through the chapel speakers. "When does the news break?" "The plane went down over the Atlantic 20 minutes ago. Mechanical failure. Tragic." Gasps rippled through the room. The heads of the 5 families looked at each other, their expressions hardening. In their world, murder was business. But betrayal? Sleeping with the Don's wife and rigging his plane? That was a sin punishable by death. Camilla sank to her knees, sobbing for real this time. "Enzo, please. He forced me. I was scared." Enzo looked down at her with zero emotion. "Or you were scared? You sounded quite excited to spend my money in the Caymans." He turned to Santino. "And you? You sold the port routes to the Russians. You betrayed our oldest allies." He nodded at the Greek delegation in the back. Santino realized it was over. The charade was done. He snarled, pulling a hidden snub-nose revolver from his ankle holster. "Die, you son of a—" Bang! The shot didn't come from Santino. It came from Sophie. She stood next to Enzo, a smoking pistol in her hand. She had drawn it from her jacket with a speed that shocked the room. Her aim was true. Santino clutched his shoulder, screaming as he dropped his gun and fell to the ground. Enzo looked at Sophie, impressed. "Nice shot. You missed his heart, though." "I wasn't aiming for his heart," Sophie said coldly. "I aimed for his shoulder. He doesn't get the easy way out. He needs to answer for my father." The room went silent. "Your father?" Santino wheezed, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "Who are you?" "I am Sofia Valenti," she announced, her voice ringing clear. "Daughter of Carlo Valenti, the man you betrayed to climb to the top." The revelation hit the room like a bomb. The Valenti name was legendary. To see his daughter standing beside Enzo Moretti, it was a unification of 2 warring bloodlines. Enzo placed a hand on Sophie's back. "Take them away." Nikos's men stepped forward, grabbing a screaming Camilla and a bleeding Santino. "Enzo, I'm your wife!" Camilla shrieked as she was dragged down the aisle. "You're a widow," Enzo corrected, "but not mine." As the doors closed on the traitors, Enzo turned to the room of stunned mobsters. He adjusted his coat. "Apologies for the interruption," Enzo said smoothly. "But I believe I have a funeral to cancel. There is work to be done." The silence that followed the gunshot in the chapel was heavier than the lead that had just shattered Santino's shoulder. The echo of the blast seemed to hang in the vaulted ceiling, mingling with the scent of lilies and cordite. Santino was writhing on the marble floor, clutching his shoulder, his blood staining the pristine white stone. A stark contrast to the perfectly orchestrated funeral he had planned. Camilla was no longer screaming. She was frozen, her eyes darting between the man she had betrayed and the woman she had tormented. Enzo didn't look at the congregation. He didn't look at the 5 other dons who were watching the scene with a mixture of shock and calculating respect. He only looked at Sophie. She hadn't lowered the gun. Her hand was steady, her breathing controlled. She looked like a statue of vengeance, Kniehal carved from ice. Nikos, Enzo said calmly, breaking the silence. The Greek mob boss stepped forward, a grim smile plastered on his face. Enzo, a beautiful service. I usually hate funerals, but this one I liked. Clear the room, Enzo commanded, his voice low but projecting to the back pews. The families can wait in the reception hall. I will speak to them in 1 hour. Right now, this is a family matter. As the room cleared, leaving only Enzo, Sophie, Nikos's guards, and the 2 traitors, the atmosphere shifted from shock to judgment. Enzo walked over to Santino, who was gasping for air. He nudged his former best friend's leg with the toe of his boot. "Get him up," Enzo ordered. 2 of Nikos's men hauled Santino to his knees. Another 2 grabbed Camilla. She began to weep, a jagged, ugly sound that grated on Enzo's nerves. "Enzo, look at me," Camilla sobbed, the mascara running down her face, making her look like a tragic clown. "It was him! Santino threatened me. He said he would kill me if I didn't give him your codes. I did it for love, Enzo. I wanted to save myself, to be there for your memory." Enzo crouched down so he was eye level with her. He reached out and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. The tenderness of the gesture made her sob harder, thinking she was forgiven. "You know, Camilla," Enzo said softly. "I almost believed you. But then I remembered the audio recording. You weren't crying when you talked about redecorating the house. You weren't scared when you laughed about my body rotting in the Atlantic." He stood up, his face hardening into stone. "You weren't a victim. You were an investor. You bet against me, and you lost." Enzo turned to Sophie. "What do you want to do with them?" Sophie holstered the gun. She walked towards them, the heels of her new boots clicking rhythmically. She stopped in front of Santino. "My father," she said, her voice quiet, "begged for his life in a warehouse on the docks. He asked for 5 minutes to say goodbye to his daughter on the phone. You told him no. You said, 'Dead men don't make calls.'" Santino spat at her feet, though the defiance was weak. He was weak, just like you. "I'm not weak, Santino," Sophie replied, tilting her head. "I lived in the wall of your enemy's house for 2 years. I served you coffee while you plotted murder. I listened to you brag about your brilliance while I washed your dirty dishes. And now, I'm the one deciding whether you bleed out on this floor or not." She turned to Enzo. "Don't kill them." Enzo raised an eyebrow. "Mercy, Sophia. That's dangerous." "Not mercy," she corrected. "Punishment. If you kill them, their suffering ends in a second. They become tragedies. Martyrs, maybe. But if they live—" She looked at Camilla, whose eyes widened in confusion. "Strip them," Sophie commanded. "Excuse me?" Camilla gasped. "You heard her." Enzo nodded to the guards. "Take everything," Sophie continued, her voice gaining strength. "The Rolexes, the diamonds, the keys to the penthouses, the access to the offshore accounts, everything. I want them to leave this church with nothing but the clothes on their backs." Enzo crossed his arms, intrigued. "And then?" "And then," Sophie said, a dark smile touching her lips, "we put them on a cargo plane. Not to the Andes. That's too exotic. We send them to a labor colony in the salt mines of Siberia. I have a contact there from the old days, a man who owes the Valenti family a favor. They need workers, unpaid, unacknowledged workers." Camilla screamed. "No, Enzo, please, just shoot me, please, just shoot me." For a woman who had spent her life draped in silk and bathing in imported milk, the prospect of hard labor in the freezing cold was a terror beyond comprehension. It was a complete dismantling of her identity. "I like it," Enzo said. He signaled the guards. "Get them out of my sight. If they speak, gag them. If they run, break their legs. But keep them alive. I want them to remember this day for the next 40 years. As they were dragged screaming from the chapel, Enzo felt a weight lift off his chest. It wasn't just the weight of the betrayal. It was the weight of the crown. He realized, for the first time in years, he wasn't carrying it alone. The following week was a blur of reconstruction. The narrative was spun expertly. The official story was that Santino Russo had attempted a coup and tragically died in a shootout with loyalists. Camilla had fled the country in shame. The 5 families accepted this version of events because it maintained stability, and because Enzo offered them favorable rates on the new shipping routes he had secured with the Greeks. By Friday, the Moretti estate had returned to a semblance of normalcy. The bullet holes in the boathouse were patched. The staff, shaken but loyal, returned to their duties. But the silence in the house was different now. It wasn't the heavy, pressurized silence of secrets. It was the quiet of a fresh start. Enzo was in the library, the fire crackling in the hearth. He was pouring 2 glasses of a 1940 scotch, a bottle he had been saving for his 10th anniversary. But this occasion felt far more worthy. He heard the door open. Sophia stood there. She had traded the maid's uniform for a tailored cream blouse and charcoal trousers. She looked professional, sharp, and breathtakingly beautiful. But there was a suitcase in her hand. Enzo's hand froze mid-pour. He set the bottle down slowly. "Going somewhere?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. Sophia walked into the room, leaving the suitcase by the door. "The account in Canada is active. I checked this morning. It's more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes, Enzo." "Thank you." "You earned it," Enzo said. He picked up the glasses and walked over to her, handing her one. "So that's it? You take the money and run?" Sophia took the glass, swirling the amber liquid. She didn't meet his eyes. "It was the deal, wasn't it? I help you take back your life, and you give me a new one. I can finally be Sophia Valenti again. I can go to California or Europe. No one knows me there. I can just be a woman, not a maid, not a spy." "Is that what you want?" Enzo asked, stepping closer. "To be just a woman?" Sophia looked up at him then, and the conflict in her hazel eyes was painful to witness. "I don't know," she whispered. "It's what I thought I wanted. For 2 years, while I scrubbed your floors, I dreamed of sitting in a cafe in Paris, reading books and never looking over my shoulder again. But, she took a sip of the scotch, the burn seeming to steel her resolve. "But this week, working the logistics with you, negotiating with Nikos, finding the leaks in the accounting, it felt electric. It felt like I was waking up after a long coma." Enzo took a step closer, invading her personal space. He smelled of tobacco and rain. "You have your father's mind, Sophia. Carlo was a brilliant strategist. He was just surrounded by snakes. You have his gift. To waste that in a cafe in Paris would be a tragedy." "And what is the alternative?" she challenged, her voice rising slightly. "Stay here? As what? The former maid? The charity case? The daughter of your enemy living under your roof?" "No," Enzo said firmly. "Never that." He walked back to his desk and picked up a thick leather folder. He handed it to her. "What is this?" she asked. "Open it." Sophia set her glass down and flipped the folder open. It was a legal document, a partnership agreement, not for a business, but for the trust that owned the entire Moretti enterprise. "I'm restructuring," Enzo said, leaning against the edge of his desk. "The underboss position is obsolete. It encourages ambition and betrayal. I'm creating a council, a duality. 2 signatures required for every major decision. One is mine." Sophia scanned the document, her eyes widening. "And the other?" "Yours," Enzo said. She dropped the folder on the desk, stepping back. "You're insane. The 5 families will never accept a woman, especially a Valenti. They'll revolt." "Let them try," Enzo shrugged, a dangerous glint in his eye. "They saw you in that church. They saw who pulled the trigger. They fear you, Sophia, and what they don't fear, they respect. Besides, with the Greeks backing us, we are untouchable." "Enzo, this is half your empire. It's an empire I wouldn't have without you," he countered. He closed the distance between them again, and this time he didn't stop until he was inches from her. He reached out, taking her hands, They were still rough, the calluses from the cleaning chemicals slowly fading, but still there. A map of her history. "I don't want a subordinate, Sophia," he said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. "I've had subordinates. I've had a wife who smiled and nodded and plotted my death. I am tired of looking over my shoulder. I want to look beside me and see the only person who knows the truth." "The truth?" she breathed, her heart hammering against her ribs. "The truth that we are the same," Enzo said. "We are both ghosts who refuse to stay dead. We are both monsters made by this city, and we are both incredibly lonely." A tear slipped down Sophia's cheek. He was right. The adrenaline of the chase had masked it, but the loneliness was a gaping void she had carried since her father died. "I can't be your maid," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I won't be silent anymore." "I never want you to be silent," Enzo vowed. "Scream. Fight. Rule. Just do it here. With me." He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. "Don't get on that plane, Sophia. Paris is boring, and the coffee there is overrated." A laugh bubbled up from her chest, a genuine, warm sound that broke the tension. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the butcher, but the man who had sat in a basement with her and stitched her wounds. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay? I stay." Enzo let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for a week. He kissed her then, a slow, searing kiss that tasted of scotch and promise. It wasn't the desperate, adrenaline-fueled kiss of the safe house. It was deliberate. It was a contract, signed in breath and skin. When they pulled apart, Enzo walked to the desk drawer and pulled out the velvet box. He pinned the Moretti Valenti crest to her blouse, right over her heart. "Welcome home, boss," he smiled. Sophia touched the pin, her fingers grazing the gold. She looked at the suitcase by the door, then back to the man standing in front of her. "One condition," she said, her eyes narrowing playfully, the sharp wit returning. "Name it." "The South Wing. I'm remodeling it. I hate the drapes." "Burn them," Enzo laughed. "Burn it all down if you want, as long as you build it back up with me." Sophia walked over to the suitcase, picked it up, and handed it to Enzo. "Make yourself useful, Enzo," she smirked, walking toward the door. "Take this upstairs. I have a meeting with the port authority in 20 minutes. We have a shipment to intercept." Enzo watched her walk away, the sway of her hips commanding the room, the hallway, the entire house. He chuckled, shaking his head as he picked up her bag. The maid was gone. The queen had arrived, and for the first time in his life, the king was perfectly happy to take orders. And that's how the maid who was told to stay silent ended up silencing the entire underworld. Enzo and Sophia didn't just survive. They rewrote the rules of the game. It's a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one holding the gun. It's the one pouring the coffee. Loyalty isn't about who has been with you the longest. It's about who stays when the storm hits. What did you think of Sophia's transformation? Did Santino and Camilla get what they deserved, or should Enzo have been harsher? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal and revenge, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to share this with a friend who loves a good twist, and subscribe for more thrilling stories every week. Thanks for listening.